Hey everybody, it's your old pal Tom here on the Tom Gulley Show. Let me tell you about the Hall Mills murders. The still unexplained, unsolved 1922 murders of two people in New Jersey that also featured probably the first national media sensation in terms of a case that the public followed on a daily basis. And it was crazy. And I'm going to tell you how crazy it was, because this case had everything. It had religion. It had an affair. It had a singer in a church choir. It had a reverend. It had a lover's lane. It had a pig woman. That's right, I said it had a pig woman. Because you don't got a trial till you have a pig woman. That's one of the key attributes of a media sensation. And a lot of people from very bizarre relationships trying to testify that they knew who did this. And it's been over 100 years now, and I'm starting to think this may never be solved. Call me crazy. But the Hall Mills murders covered extensively in the newspaper. Radio had just begun. The radio wasn't even anything close to what it would become. Not everywhere even had a station. But the newspapers, they went gaga over this case. And why wouldn't they? You tell me two people are dead, maybe an affair, maybe a scandal involved. You tell me one was a church choir singer and one was the head of the church. And I'm pretty interested. But you throw in, and we have a pig woman. Hey, where's the popcorn, kids? Gather around the set. I'm in. This is our cold open that we do for our audio podcast listeners. We are a YouTube interactive show, so we give people time after I go live to file into our interactive chat room. And during that time, we play music created by our musical director and musical genius, Leon Kennedy. Now, this sort of streaming online elevator music is meant to kill the time till the show starts at the top of the hour. But if you are watching us on demand on YouTube or listening to our audio podcast on one of the 30 platforms that it's on, you can you can send in donations so I can learn to speak. You can scroll right through the songs, big mistake because they're awesome, and get to the top of the hour meat of the show. Unless, of course, you're a vegetarian. And then you can get to the kelp of the show. So with all that being said, and I know you're squealing with delight because tonight we have a pig woman. Here's a couple songs. Then let me tell you about the Hall Mills murders.
Tom Gulley's back. Yeah, Tom Gulley's back. We're on the track. We're never off the track. Yeah. Tom Gulley's on the air. face. He cuts through the noise, never chasing the race. Just Tom on the waves at a steady pace. Yeah, yeah, Tom's back. He's putting down the track. The Tom Gulley Show is back. He's putting down the track. Yeah, yeah, Tom's back. He's putting down the track. The Tom Gulley Show is back. He's putting down the track. Headphones on, the lights begin to glow. Every night he's got a story to show. From strange little moments to the things we all know. He lets it all breathe and he lets it all go. Laughter breaks through, then a pause, then a truth. From the good old days in a radio booth. Don't ask for facts, don't beg for proof. We dance in the dark to that gully groove. Yeah, yeah, Tom's back. He's laying down the facts. The Tom Gulley Show is back. He's laying down the facts. Yeah, yeah, Tom's back. He's laying down the facts. The Tom Gulley Show is back. He's laying down the facts. Oh yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Oh yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Oh yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Oh yeah. Tom's back. It doesn't take much. He's back. He's laying down the facts. Oh yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Oh yeah, yeah. Doesn't take much. Passing by an exit, like reflections low. You're leaving behind what you've come to know. Turn that dial as the white lines roll, and tune in to that familiar show. We're passing in the night. Two strangers on the highway. On the highway. Headlights burning bright. We're passing in the night. Two strangers on the road. On the road. Tuned into the Tom Gulley Show. Leaving on the turning, the sun begins to rise. The lights ahead are burning as you rub your tired eyes. Turn up that radio as the lines start to slur, and just enjoy that familiar show. We're passing in the night. Two strangers on the highway. On the highway. Headlights burning bright. Two strangers on the road.
everybody, what's going on? What's hot? What's hip? What's happening? What is shaking? Let me tell you about the Hall Mills murders. They were murders, yes. And there were people named Hall and people named Mills. And that's why they call them the Hall Mills murders. And I guess they decided alphabetically how to do that. I don't know who got top billing. I don't know if there was a negotiation on that. I don't know anything else. Excuse me. Except that there was a sensational coverage of this in the newspapers every day. There were crazy people testifying, and they didn't figure out who did it. But they did a bunch of stuff, and people did weird, crazy things involving this trial, which I will show you. And, of course, in an effort to increase viewership and make this the internet sensation that's sweeping the nation, I got you a pig woman. Yeah, it ain't a party without a pig woman, as far as I'm concerned. Do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell, all those absolutely free things that you can do. They only cost you a click. That help us out with the algorithm, the almighty, all-powerful, all-knowing algorithm. Plus, we do have the super chats, the memberships, the gifted memberships. You can go to our YouTube description, and we've got the PayPal where you give the most, we get the most. Google is not part of that process, so nobody takes that cut, that 30% cut. That's a pretty big cut, if you ask me. Considering I'm doing all the work. Just saying. Also, you can go to the TomGulleyShow.com, and there's merch there. We don't have any pig woman merchandise yet, but it's in development. Trust me. Let's go to our interactive YouTube chat room. Leon Kennedy, our musical director, is here. He says he's back, and when he said he's back, I just figured he wanted to hear the Tom Gulley's Back song. It's one of my favorites, so I went ahead and played it. And Guido Samurai is here. It says, Tom, and he says, found a new group of idiots I'm obsessed with, people who kayak the Congo. Oh, yeah, they're up there. They're up there with bullfighters, people that climb mountains. People that climb mountains are just... We will do another show or two on the mountain climbing people. I the people that are up on the mountain, or the people that even do the hiking sometimes, they always go missing first. First you have to go missing. Then... you hear that they went missing, and you go, well, they're not alive anymore. They've been missing. They're, 2 weeks now. They fell off the mountain or something. Unless, of course, they were with people that actually saw them fall. And gravity is undefeated against human beings. 100% undefeated. And then comes my favorite part, where people go, well, he was an experienced mountaineer. He was a veteran hiker. I've never once heard them say, he was really bad at this, and he shouldn't have been doing it. Or he was an inexperienced. They never say that. They always say, well, he was known to be he was copious in his... No. Anyway, we might do a show on that. We should do a show on that. I wrote an essay one time on the internet that went viral, and it was called On Idiots Who Climb Mountains. It covers the whole thing. Guido says they are our favorite idiots. Yes. We won't get into the whole Everest thing. The people that just pay a lot of money, and some poor Sherpa has to tie a rope to them and pretty much drag them to the top of the Everest and then drag them down. And they go, I climbed Everest. And people go, wow, that person, they live a different kind of life than the rest of us. They were seeking something that the rest of us will never understand. And it's a big rock. He went to the top of it. Please post that article. I don't know where it's at now. It was on some sort of site where you just posted articles. This was it was a long time ago. Maybe a search could find it. I don't know. I know some people once found it because there's some other articles on there that were also critical of human beings and made me look kind of bad with the mountaineering community. Those folks were not happy with me for quite some time. It was when those guys went up on Mount Hood and they left the one guy in a snow cave because he had dislocated his shoulder, and they were going to do what was called a quick climb. So they didn't take a lot of gear or warm clothing, and 100-mile-an-hour winds and blizzard conditions and sub-zero temperatures caught them up there, especially the guy in the snow cave. And the other two guys went for help. I don't think they've ever found them. There's pretty much universally recognized that they got blown off the side of the mountain. And then the one guy is in the snow cave getting intermittent reception on his satellite phone, has to call his wife and tell her what happened and that he's not going to make it. That must be a great call. And those people were like, you are evil, you're terrible, think of their families. And I'm like, think of their families? Why should I? They didn't. They went up there with some windbreakers, and anyway. Yeah, the mountain people were very upset. Oh, now see, I've messed up my... All right, whatever. The Hall Mills murder case. Oh, boy, where to begin? Where to begin with this sideshow? And it was a sideshow. Oh, by the way, before we get going too far, the chef sent me some pictures that I didn't see till right before the show, so I'll show those on Saturday when we cover Coronet Blue. And I'd like to mention when we cover the cultish TV show Coronet Blue, I will be singing the Coronet Blue theme song. I know. Squeal with delight. The Hall Mills murder case involved Edward Wheeler Hall. Now, I'll show you Edward Wheeler Hall, but there aren't a lot of good pictures of Edward Wheeler Hall. Sorry, audio podcast audience. Let me see here. I've got some pictures of a bunch of people. Here we go. Oh, look at that. I apparently don't have that picture. Well, that's great. We're starting off the show just in fine fashion here today. But I do have, Edward Wheeler Hall was an Episcopal priest. And Eleanor Mills, who I do have a picture of, was a member of his choir. Now, how did these people know each other? Well, they were having an affair. And both of them were murdered on September 14th, 1922 in Franklin Township, New Jersey. Hall's wife, we'll get to her in a second. Oh, is she a piece of work? And her brothers were accused of committing the murders. In the history of journalism, this case is largely remembered for the vast nationwide newspaper coverage it received, and that was very unusual for a local murder case at that time. National stories, oh yeah, they were tabloid, they were sensationalistic, but a local case like this, unusual. However, you had all those elements, and anytime you bring a pig woman into the mix, all bets are off. It wasn't until the Lindbergh kidnapping in the 30s that there was a trial bigger than the Hall Mills murder case. The biggie. So on September 16th, 1922, the bodies of Eleanor Mills and Edward Hall were discovered in a field near a farm in Somerset County, New Jersey, out in the boonies, out in the boondocks, some might say. And they did so many weird things about this case. It's insane. This, for example, is it the murder scene? Sorry, audio podcast listeners, there's two bodies laying in the middle of a field. No. Because they didn't have the photos, two of the police investigators went out and laid in a field so that the newspaper people could take a picture of them laying in a field to recreate the scene of this horrible crime. Both of the bodies were on their backs, as you can see in these silly picture the investigators had taken of themselves lying on their back in the middle of a field. Both were shot in the head with a .32 caliber pistol. The man, Edward Hall, he was shot once, and Eleanor Mills was shot 3 times. The bullet entered the man's head over his right ear, exited through the back of his neck. The woman was shot under the right eye, over the right temple, and over the right ear. Police at the scene also noted the woman's throat had been severed. So they were mad at the lady here, really mad. Oh, and by the way, just to add to the fun, I got you a pig woman. But if that's not enough for you, maggots were already in the wound, indicating the death occurred at least 24 hours earlier. Because they had the maggots, The bodies, as you saw, appeared to be positioned right next to each other. I've got another picture here. This is the one, but, here you go. Because this trial was so sensational, people actually took paper cutouts of the shape of two people and placed them where they were found, and would show people and bring them by. And, of course, the newspapers took a picture of it. And, of course, it's totally ridiculous looking by today's standards. And I have to imagine that even in 1922, you'd be going, that is moronic. You took cardboard cutouts and put them on the ground where the... I don't know. It's like, did somebody taking a Matchbox car to Dealey Plaza and put it in the street? And you know what I'm saying. The bodies appear to have been positioned side by side after death. After death. And because this trial was so sensational, and they were looking for so many reasons to make any sort of news about this, we know that both of their feet were pointing toward a crabapple tree. Now, what that has to do with the price of eggs in China, I don't know. But it's a clue, I guess. The man had a hat covering his face, and, very importantly, his calling card was placed at his feet. Also, torn up love letters were placed between the bodies. So what we know is these people were horribly killed. Their bodies, after they were killed, were placed next to each other. The guy's calling card was at his feet, so apparently the killer or killers wanted everybody to know who he was. We know they were really mad at the lady, Mrs. Lady, and they wanted everybody to know they were having an affair because they put the torn up love letters between them. Now, did the killers do this in an effort to shame these people? Was there some sort of, I don't know, lovers' quarrel? And one of the two ripped up the letters? I don't know. I got no idea. I do know this. A jurisdictional issue complicated the initial investigation because the crime scene was near the border between Somerset County, which was a county, and then Middlesex County. The New Brunswick police, Middlesex County, arrived first, but the crime scene was actually in Franklin Township, Somerset County. When the authorities released the first information, they had to address this confusion. And when they released the information, trying to address the confusion, curiosity seekers trampled the scene, took souvenirs, passed Hall's calling card among the crowd. And so the physical evidence was, if not severely compromised, totally destroyed. Totally destroyed. There's the calling card. Edward W. Hall, Church of St. John the Evangelist, New Brunswick. Anyway. The woman, as I mentioned earlier and showed you earlier, was identified as Eleanor Mills, the wife of James Mills. She was a married woman. She was wearing a blue dress with red polka dots, black silk stockings, and brown shoes. She had worn a blue velvet hat that was on the ground near her body, and her brown silk scarf was wrapped around her throat. Her arm had a bruise, and there was a tiny cut on her lip. Her left hand had been positioned to touch the man's, well, let's just call it right thigh. By the way, I'm showing you a picture here a little bit early so you can drink in the beauty of this woman. The man was identified as Edward Wheeler Hall, a New Brunswick Episcopal priest. He was found with his right arm positioned to touch the woman's neck. They staged these people to really make them look awful, to really make them look like philanderers, you know? His hat covered his face, which concealed the gunshot wound to his head. He wore a pair of glasses. There was a small bruise on the tip of his ear. And kudos to the medical examiner for doing ear bruise research. Abrasions were found on his left little finger and right index finger. How you get that combination, no idea. A wound was found 5 inches below his kneecap on the calf of his right leg. His gold watch was missing, but there were coins in his pocket. This woman that I'm showing you right now is the wife of Edward Hall, Frances Stevens Hall. Now let's look at Frances Stevens Hall. There she is. And yeah, it's a she. Audio podcast audience, I'm showing a woman who is, putting it charitably, what I would call extremely mannish in the face. Extremely mannish in the face. She's not a looker. You know, she looks a little bit like Art Carney. So you got Eleanor Mills, smoking hot choir singer, or Francis Stevens Hall, truck driver. Yeah, it's bad. That's bad. Anyway. That's bad. So they decide they're going to have an investigation, like you do. And the suspects were this woman I'm showing you, Frances Noel Stevens, and her two brothers. And remember, we're dealing with 100 years ago, so everybody had to have 3, if not 4 names. Henry Hugel, yes, it's Hugel, Stevens, and William Willie Carpenter Stevens, and a cousin. And the cousin looked over at the other 2 guys and he said, "Oh, you got 3 names, you got 4? Hold my beer." Henry de la Bruyere Carpenter. And Carpenter is a weird spelling. It's like carpenter, but it's got a D instead of a T at the end. Everything about this thing is weird. The original 1922 investigation by Joseph E. Stricker yielded no indictments. So they investigated it and they go, "We don't know who's doing this or why it was done, and we don't got anything we can charge anybody with." So unfortunately, in the great day of the newspaper, the newspapers were very tabloid back then. Everybody looks back at the old newspaper days, and certainly there was high standards in journalism for some papers. But other papers were just trying to make a buck, and they were very tabloid. After no indictments were returned, continued speculation in the New York Daily Mirror, fueled by comments made by a man associated with one of Mrs. Hall's housekeepers. By the way, I'll show you the housekeepers later. You want to see a world-class example of stink eye? I'll show you that picture. Anyway, all of this resulted in Governor Harry A. Moore. That's right, Harry A. Moore, ordering a second investigation and a trial 4 years later in 1926. Henry Carpenter won a bid to be tried separately from the 3 others accused, and ultimately he was never tried. And that was a stroke of genius from him, because that actual trial, freak show, as we'll get to. The Hall Mills trial began on November 3rd, 1926, in the Somerset County Courthouse in Somerville. And it's not summer like the season, it's summer like SOMER. It's like coffee. It sounds the same. It's spelt different. With Charles W. Parker and Frank Cleary presiding as judges. Now, why did they need 2 judges is the thing I asked when I first started. Did they do that? Can you have 2 judges? These are ways differing from my own. I don't know. And by the way, Charles W. Parker just looks awful. Wait a minute, that's not Charles W. Parker. That's another guy. I'm going to just leave him up. It lasted about 30 days and garnered a huge national audience, largely because of the social status of the wealthy Stevens and Carpenter families. And I'll get to how rich they were in a second. They were richy rich. They had a lot of moolah, greenbacks, sawbucks, scratch, dead presidents. The prosecuting attorney was Alexander Simpson. The defense attorneys were Robert H. McCarter. That's who this is a picture of. And he's got resting, I've got a bad stomach face. But he was a former New Jersey attorney general. And remember, the people who were charged were Hall's wife and her 2 brothers and a cousin. And they were rich. So they got a former New Jersey Attorney General. And Joseph A. Farrow was the testifying fingerprint expert. But, you know, the only thing they really had was that card. And everybody in the crowd had passed it around 100 times. So it wasn't really, you know what I mean? The prosecution's key witness in the case, I'm going to tell you about in a second, because I'm going to have to stop down for so long on this person. It's not even funny. Actually, I am going to tell you about this lady, and I'm going to tell you about her right now. Their key witness was Jane Gibson, a pig farmer on whose property the bodies were discovered. And she was dubbed by the national press as Pig Woman. Now, the defense portrayed Gibson as uneducated and crazy and attempted to ruin her credibility, which, in retrospect, they really didn't have to do. She was nuttier than a bag of cats. I mean, and I can't emphasize that enough. Her account of what happened or what she saw or anything else varied, differing when told to police or to the newspapers or at the trial. Oh, did I mention during the trial she fell hysterically ill? I don't think ill, but just nerves and things like that. She testified from bed in the courtroom. Yes, they rolled a hospital bed into the packed Somerset courthouse, and she testified. And I'm sorry, audio podcast listeners, a picture says a million words. Pig Woman was just, like I said, crazier than a bag of cats. Crazy. I got a better. Here's some investigators to think. Okay. Eleanor Mills was married to James Mills. Okay, so she's a married woman having an affair. James was the acting sexton, which is just kind of like a deacon or something at St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church. But his full-time job was as a janitor at the Lord Sterling Elementary School. Yes. So she's married to a janitor of an elementary school. And the husband of rich lady, church guy, starts hitting on her. What do you think's going to happen? I don't think you have to, you know what I mean? Anyway, she's buried in the Van Loo Cemetery in North Brunswick, as are her husband and their two children. Is that a crabapple tree in the cemetery? Because if so, that's poor taste. Edward Hall. Now, he married Frances Noel Stevens, who I'm just going to call Frances Stevens Hall. Let me tell you something about her. Ugh. There's a better look at her. Bennett, dude looks like a lady. Bennett. It's the opposite. She's just really, she looks like a guy that delivers Dolly Madison products off a truck. Anyway, Edward married her back in 2011, so they'd been married about 11 years. He was raised in Brooklyn, receiving his theological degree in Manhattan. Now, after graduation, he, was a preacher, a couple different places, but then he moves to St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church in New Brunswick. By the way, he also is buried in, look at the place he's buried in. I mean, that's a serious cemetery there. Looks like the outside of Emerald City. Audio podcast listeners, it actually does look like the entrance to somewhere in Lord of the Rings. It's prestigious. Now, they did have what you like to call some suspects. And let's just start with, I don't know, the guy that probably has more names than he should, Henry de la Bruyere Carpenter. And he was born in 1882. He lived with his wife Mary it was a cousin of Francis Stevens Hall, who, again, mannish in the face. And his mother was one of the Carpenters. This guy worked as a Wall Street stockbroker, and although he was an initial suspect, he was never brought to trial. He died in May of 1934 due to a blood clot after several years of paralysis from a stroke. Now, the biggest suspect, the person they thought was really at the bottom of all this, was, of course, Francis Stevens Hall, the wife. Right? That's who. In the prosecution's scenario, she instigated the murder of her cheating husband. And here's how rich she is. And I don't think you have to be a genius to know this means you're rich. After she died, her home was bought. This isn't her home, but it's a picture of Rutgers University. So they bought her home. Oh, wait, this might be her home. They bought her home. Rutgers University buys her home, and they use it as the residence of the dean of Douglas Residential College. So a dean gets to have that house. Mrs. Hall was related to many of the wealthy families of New Brunswick, New Jersey, including the Carpenters, the Nielsen's, and the Johnsons of Johnson & Johnson fame, who are spectacularly rich. Spectacular. This is Robert Wood Johnson, one of the two brothers that founded Johnson & Johnson. And if you're related to them, you're doing okay. You're doing okay. The chef is here. Good to see the chef. Henry Hugel. And it's Hugel. Hugel? Doesn't matter. If you have three names and one of them's Hugel, maybe considering just using two names. He was a retired exhibition marksman. That's how rich this guy is. What do you do for a living? Well, I'm a retired exhibition marksman. Is that a profession? And he lived in Lavallette, New Jersey. The prosecution contended that he is the one that fired the shots that killed these people. Henry Hugel Stevens testified that he was fishing miles away from the murder on the night of the killing, and 3 witnesses corroborated his testimony. But if you're that rich, you can probably always get somebody to corroborate your testimony, right? I mean, he died of a heart attack on December 3rd, 1939, while preparing for a trip to Florida. William Carpenter Stevens. Oh, by the way, please like, share, subscribe, retweet, notification bell. All these free things, they don't cost you a penny. Oh, no. They'd help me out a little bit. William Willie Carpenter Stevens owned a .32 caliber pistol, like the one used in the murder, although, and this is just weird, the firing mechanism was supposed to have been filed down so he couldn't hurt himself with it. So this is one of those rich guys that you don't give matches to. You know what I'm saying? You don't. In the prosecution scenario, he provided the weapon, which makes no sense to me because if you're a retired exhibition marksman, don't you just have weapons laying around for your job? But whatever. And his fingerprint was found on a calling card left at the scene of the crime. But again, that card got passed around all over the place, and who knows what happened there. Willie was a colorful character on the witness stand, delivering credible and not unsympathetic testimony. He was incapable of holding a job and spent most of his time, get this, hanging out at a local firehouse. Willie's eccentric personality was consistent with high-functioning autism, but the condition had not been clinically described and no diagnosis really can be made. But let's just say he was tetched, he was pixelated, he was out there. Now to get to the star of our show. The star of our show. Pig Woman. Jane Gibson. The woman that they called Pig Woman. Now, it's not her fault these people were killed on her property. But it is kind of her fault that she was nutty, right? Even so, can you imagine you wake up tomorrow morning, something bad has happened on your property, and they suddenly name you Pig Boy, or, you know what I mean? That's not. Well, anyway, Jane and her son William lived in an old barn that had been converted into a living space because, of course, she's Pig Woman. The press called her the Pig Woman because she raised hogs. She told investigators that her dog was barking loudly about 9 p.m. on the night of the murder. She went outside her house and she saw a man standing in her cornfield. She rode her horse. Did I say horse? I meant mule. Yes, she rode her mule because, of course, toward Easton Avenue to approach the man. As she got closer, she saw there were 4 people standing near the aforementioned crabapple tree. She heard gunshots, and one of the figures fell to the ground, presumably dead. She testified that a woman screamed, "Don't," 3 times. She said that she turned her mule, of course, in the opposite direction and headed back to her house, then heard more gunshots. When she looked back at the tree, she saw a second person fall down, presumably dead. She testified that she heard a woman shout the name Henry. Now remember, we do have as one of the suspects Henry de la Bruyere Carpenter. But let's just think about Jane Gibson's testimony for just a second. By the way, I'm going to try to show you the lover's lane that they were found in. There it is. So, she heard gunshots, and it's nighttime, by the way. It's 9 p.m. And one of the figures falls to the ground. And then a woman says, "Don't," 3 times. So she turns her mule the other way and speeds off as only a mule can and heads back to her house. But then she hears 3 more gunshots, and she looked back and saw a second person fall down. But see, here's the thing. If you shoot somebody the way these people were shot, according to the autopsy and everything, you couldn't turn around and see them fall after you heard the gunshots. They would have already, because gravity, it just doesn't make sense. Doesn't make a lot of sense. After the trial, for which Francis Stevens Hall was found not guilty, Mrs. Hall brought a defamation suit against the New York Daily Mirror, and they settled that out of court, allegedly for a large, unspecified amount. The New York Times accounts were actually more, way more. There are more of them. And just crazy things. But she didn't sue them. The New York Times dedicated more space to the Hall Mills murders than any other previous trial in American history. I mean, a lot. Stevens had allegedly made threats to harm Edward Hall. So she was threatening as well as gorgeous. They had to exhume the body of Eleanor Mills, who they called the choir singer, and in some cases, the nightingale, because she was a choir singer. So they had to dig her up. Mr. Mills, the wife, has her body exhumed, and he apparently also had to see his wife's body at the autopsy. And of course, they threatened that. There were other witnesses of the death threats that Francis Stevens Hall had made. Oh, they got plenty of people out to the crime scene, to Pig Woman's locale. The maids, the housekeepers had to testify. Now, one of them's smiling, and one of them has the most world-class case of stink eye you'd ever want to see. Ever. Oh, did I mention that crabapple tree? People came from all over the country to cut a sliver off the crabapple tree. I guess times were different. There wasn't a lot to do. And that seemed like fun. I don't know. I know, and apologies, audio podcast listeners, the guy on the left there is wearing a bowler hat, and he's got his cigar off to the side like they do in old movies. Move aside, Mac. I got to get some of this crabapple tree for the wife. It's awful. Absolutely awful. This trial and the murders themselves have been examined in fiction and in nonfiction. Please remember, no radio, no television. Little bit of radio, but not really yet. Wasn't big. Everybody didn't have one yet. And so this was the biggest thing that there was. And as a result, a lot of people covered it. Legendary author Damon Runyon was also a reporter, and he was there, as well as famed mystery novelist Mary Roberts Reinhardt, H.L. Mencken, who was just a spectacularly famous writer, And also Billy Sunday. Billy Sunday, this is weird, but it's the truth. Billy Sunday had been a professional baseball player for 8 years, and he quit baseball to become like an evangelist on TV. You know those guys? He was one of those. Willie Stevens, that colorful character that couldn't be trusted with his own, stuff, he was later the subject of an essay by James Thurber, who was a humorist and sort of commentarian of the time. The trial inspired a bunch of novels, including Francis Noyes Hart's novel, The Bellamy Trial. And this is important because up to now, there hadn't been any real novels about courtroom mysteries. And so this was the first novel that sort of really got into the courtroom aspect of things. And so she was famous. And she's so famous, she's talking to some guys in her expensive car with her knitted hat on. But if you had a knitted hat back then, you were on 32 skidoo. You were the bee's knees. Even before the trial, there was a silent movie called The Goose Woman. Apparently to get around copyright claims or defamation or something. Or maybe they just didn't think that The Pig Woman was box office enough, but and they actually remade that movie 10 minutes later. Legendary attorney and liberal activist William Kunstler wrote a 1964 book titled The Minister and the Choir Singer, which he re-released with added editorial material in 1980 as The Hall Mills Murders. In his book, Kunstler theorized that the KKK had been responsible for the couple's demise based on the fact that the Klan was a very violent organization. Thanks, William. And was active in New Jersey until the 1920s, but he acknowledged that the Klan had not previously harmed anyone in the state and could only speculate on why the KKK would target this particular couple, both who were not really involved in racial politics. Fictional detective Nero Wolfe reads this book in A Right to Die while investigating a similar situation. Gerald Tomlinson's Fatal Tryst, Who Killed the Minister and the Choir Singer, is the most detailed exploration of the case ever written, and concludes that the Stevens siblings were the guilty parties. Seems like it, don't it? There's actually a walkthrough tour of the Hall Mills murders that you can find online. Yes. Let's go online. It's the burgeoning local cottage industry. Right there, the Hall Mills murders. I think I have some other stuff here. As the investigators, you can almost see these guys. It looks like about 12 guys standing in a circle looking at each other. What do you think, Mac? I don't know, pal. Say. Kind of a bummer they had to exhume the wife. This is the New York Times. The day after, technically, that everyone was acquitted. Not guilty verdict in Hall case. Plan to free prisoners on bail today and probably quash all other charges. So somebody got away with it. Now, I doubt that after doing a show on the Hall Mills murders, that we're going to get a 117-year-old guy coming forward saying he knows what happened. But if we do, you're welcome. You're welcome, Justice. Incidentally, they interviewed the maggots, but the maggots really had nothing to say. They were relatively stoic on the subject. Torn up love letters. Tears on my pillow. Torn love letters. Wow. Why were they out there? It was the Lover's Lane. I get that. I know why people go to Lover's Lane. I'm not a rube. We didn't have Lover's Lane. We had the drive-in. There was no Lover's Lane. But I know why people go there. I listen to popular music. I'm not a fool. They go there for one of two reasons. They either go there to get their groove thing on, or they go there to get their swerve on, I think. It's one of the two. Who followed them? Was it known that they went out there all the time? Why couldn't Edward Hall spring for a cheap motel room? If, according to the pig woman, who frankly, as comical and ridiculous as I think it is, she might have been onto something with this laying in bed, testifying in court thing. I love how everyone around her in the courtroom, and it's kind of a wide shot. You can see, probably 20 people. She's normalized testifying from bed. None of them seem particularly shocked that this pig woman is laying in a bed testifying in court. And frankly, I got to say, pig woman is a little of an overpromise. When I first learned of the pig woman, you can imagine my heart jumping for joy when that happened. I expected her to look much more piggish. I expected some flaring snout and maybe a curly tail. I want a full-on Porky Pig. However, in retrospect, she does look like a pig woman. I mean, a woman who lives in a refurbished barn and raises pigs. So, that, ladies and gents, is absolutely everything I have to tell you about the Hall Mills murders. There's more. There's other wacky things that happen, but those are the major wacky things that happen. And so, whoever did it got away with it. They've never figured out who did it. They never even had anybody else they could charge. They looked around for other witnesses. Horsewoman, chicken woman, sheep woman. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. Hey, coming up on the big show, Saturday, Coronet Blue. I will be singing the Coronet Blue theme song. Really weird First of all, it was a weird TV show for the time. It was an interesting concept, but off the beaten path somewhat. And then its broadcast history was weird. And it becoming a hit was weird. It's still kind of a cult favorite today. But the reason you don't know about it is also weird. Is it Pig Woman weird? Debatable. And then on Sunday, you're going to want to be here for this one. We will cover everything about the Rifleman. Okay. Well, that's all I got. No show tomorrow. Unless something crazy happens. You know, some famous person passes away. Something. So we'll see you on Saturday. Thank you all for being here. Much appreciated. You guys rock. You make it all happen. Share this stuff when there's a good show, not this one. Share it with other people that you know of interest, or post it on your own social media. Do what you want. Do what you want. I'm not in charge of you. I wonder if I could do this show from bed. It's too many things to operate. I don't think I could do it. Anyway, with all of that being said, looking at that old clock on the wall, it says it's time for me to amscray. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I hope that you personally, today and tomorrow and for the rest of the days of your life, have a pig woman in your corner. That's my hope for you. And with all that being said, the only thing left to say is, till next time, we'll see you next time.
Passing by an exit, like reflections low, you're leaving behind what you've come to know. Turn that dial as the white lines roll, and tune in to that familiar show. We're passing in the night, two strangers on the highway. On the highway, headlights burning bright. We're passing in the night, two strangers on the road. On the road, tuned into the Tom Gulley Show. Leaving on the turning, the sun begins to rise. The lights ahead are burning as you rub your tired eyes. Turn up that radio as the lines start to slur, and just enjoy that familiar show. We're passing in the night, two strangers on the highway. On the highway, headlights burning bright. We're passing in the night, two strangers on the road. Headlights